Hi guys, it's Debbie and today is a very happy day for me as I'm finally back to speaking about Indian films. One of my biggest dreams is to visit India. I'm really interested in the culture, and as a huge film fan, how could I not watch Indian movies, especially as the country is so invested in the film culture. So a couple of years back, I started watching Indian films you guys recommended me. I even made a few review videos about films like Dangal, Tare Zameen Par, Three Idiots. Those reviews are pretty cringeworthy, but if you're interested in seeing them, I will leave them linked down below. It was the effort that counted. Now obviously when watching a film, there are certain elements which are not only lost in translation, but are something that can only be understood and appreciated by a local. This is beyond the simple language barrier. I'm speaking of all the scenes which cover real life events or situations that only a local would be totally familiar with, but would completely go over a foreigner's head. This isn't only relative to India, this applies to all countries and films which cover very specific cultural traits. So when you guys were telling me about all your favourite films, some of you pointed out how you would not tell me about films I just wouldn't get because they're mostly suitable for an Indian audience or in general for somebody who is completely knowledgeable about those specific traits. That is why you might not see me reviewing some of your favourite films at the moment. But there are so many other titles out there, so we have plenty to go through. So about a month ago, I asked you guys to give me some new recommendations, and one title immediately stood out. It immediately caught my attention. And I apologise in advance if I mispronounce anything throughout this whole video, but the title of the film is Andhadhun. Now as Westerners, we have a very stereotyped vision of Indian cinema. We all immediately tend to think of 4-hour-long dance pieces with exaggerated action sequences and incredible star-crossed love stories. I actually found a meme that describes exactly what Westerners expect all Indian cinema to look like. Bollywood logic. Punch one guy, 50 fall down, 3 buses flip over, all the vegetable stores get destroyed, and the girlfriend gets prepared to dance. But that isn't always the case. It's like thinking that modern Italian films are still period pieces with busty women riding around bikes in the Sicilian countryside, or that British films are all about the war times. Of course, all stereotypes are based on some form of truth, and many films do still keep those elements, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes as Westerners, we tend to not imagine anything different from that. And I think the film I'm going to speak about today, Andhadhun, is one of the perfect examples of how far Indian cinema can go from our preconceptions. I'm going to delve into the plot without giving away any spoilers, so don't worry if you haven't seen the film yet. So Andhadhun covers the story of a very talented pianist who also happens to be completely blind. He can't see a thing. Regardless of his vision impairment, he still manages to have a very successful musical career, and he also manages to easily get about in his daily life. One day, he is invited to play at a private session in a very wealthy household. So Akash is there, playing away, completely oblivious to everything that's going on around him. But the starting point of the story is that a murder just occurred in that household. So where Akash is playing, actually right beside his piano, there is the corpse, the murder scene with blood and everything. So the pianist turns out to be a witness of the crime scene, but he's obviously not going to suddenly run off to the police and tell him what he just didn't see. But obviously this situation gets him unwillingly involved in everything that a murder entails. And when I first saw the trailer, I actually thought the story would just revolve around this event. So him being dragged into this situation. And I was already pretty pleased with that. I thought it sounded like a very interesting starting point for a thriller film. But that murder scene turns out to be just the first step into the downward spiral of this plot. It's like the first domino in a domino reaction. As I was mentioning earlier, I'm not going to go into any more specific details about the plot to not spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen the film, but basically after that event, all the characters get involved into an endless game of cat and mouse. So killers, witnesses, blackmailing, corruption, you name it. And whenever you think it's over, in comes another plot twist. So if I was already intrigued by the simple idea of this blind pianist being blindly witness to a murder scene and being involved in that, I was then surprised with a much denser plot. Many of you actually told me you consider this one of the best Indian films of 2019, and although unfortunately I haven't seen that much, to give my opinion, to agree or disagree, I can definitely see why so many people enjoyed it, myself included. But let's get to everything point by point. So the film doesn't actually involve that many characters or particularly elaborate locations. You're not going to see high intensity chases and incredibly choreographed action sequences of dozens of main characters. But the film makes good use of what it has. So concerning the characters, there are three main ones. And again, I apologize in advance for my terrible pronunciation of everybody's names. But of course, we have our pianist Akash, portrayed by Ayushmann Khurrana, who really managed to convey anxiety, the panic that is induced by this situation in which he gets involved. As a person who knows very well how bad anxiety can get, although I've never been present at a crime scene, I really appreciate when anxiety is well portrayed on screen, because it's not the same as conveying fear or anger. It has a lot to do with breathing, or with how what's going on inside of you, how your mind is wearing away, how that situation affects you in the hours or days following the event. Your body gestures suddenly change. It's a lot of subtle details. For example, and sorry for bringing up this film as an example for the millionth time, in Manchester by the Sea, Lucas Hedges portrays a teenager who loses his father, and throughout the film he excellently conveys the effects of anxiety to the point that I've actually had to pause the film in some moments. Anyway, all of this is to say that here in Andhadhun, I really appreciated how all the workings of Akash's mind were portrayed, how all his thoughts were just going at full speed. Another character I really liked is Akash's new girlfriend slash friend slash lover, Sophie, who is portrayed by Radhika Apte, and I particularly enjoyed how genuine and natural she felt, especially when conveying stronger emotions. This genuine effect was actually the feature I enjoyed the most about the two main female characters, so Sophie and Simi Sinya. Simi is the woman who is present in the household when Akash is invited to play the piano. So she is present there with the corpse. She is involved in all that situation. She is the one that lies to him, the one that tells him just to keep on playing. She hides everything, and I loved her character throughout the whole film. She is portrayed by, I think it's pronounced Taboo and not Taboo, who gave such a powerful and emotion-filled performance. There's some moments she nearly made me cry. At the beginning of the film, in the scene in which she is lying to Akash, she is hiding the fact that there is a body there present in that moment. That scene kind of seems a little childish. It's a little fake, and there are some elements that I would have totally cut out. But if you consider the scene as a whole, that moment for what it is, of course her acting would look childish and fake. She is a person suddenly having to come up with a whole improvised fake situation to cover what has just happened, basically to avoid ending up in trouble with the law, potentially for life. We would all act weird and stiff and childish in a similar situation. It's actually pretty hard to get away with lies, and lies are a huge component of this film. How long can you get away with your lie? How good are you at telling your lie? And are you proud of what you're lying about? And this is not only concerning that murder scene, but many more things. So there wasn't a huge cast, just a few main roles and then some additional background characters. But because of this genuine acting, they were suitable enough for the whole plot. The same goes for the setting. You're not going to see some high-intensity Chris Nolan style setups. Even the locations were pretty basic, but they were just what we needed. Especially because the cinematography was really good. There were some shots, especially those involving Akash and Simi, that were really compelling. Now, although this film is described simply as a thriller, I believe there is a lot left open for interpretation. Not so much for the story itself, but for the themes that are covered. And I don't know whether I should delve deeper into this for fear of spoilers, but it speaks a lot about trust and betrayal, something you might not have been planning on seeing right from the trailer. It speaks about greed, honor, respect of what people think of you, and what you're willing to endure in order to maintain that idea people have of you. Let's just say the film lets you form your own opinion on the characters, even on the main ones, and on the choices they make. It doesn't create the perfect little scenario of, these are the main characters, You have to love them. It allows you to make your own opinion. I'm kind of on the lookout for more dark, gripping thrillers like this one. I know some of you recommended Badler and Game Over, although that's a little more on the horror side. So if you have any other recommendations, just fire them my way. I'll be more than grateful. As you saw, I really enjoyed this recommendation, and if you're looking for a good thriller, this could be the right thing for you. I would love to hear your opinion about the film and about all the other topics we covered today, so make sure to leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Bye.